The Witcher 3, The Poisoned Source. No one is born a mage. We still know too little about genetics and the mechanisms of heredity. We devote too little time and resources to this research. Sadly, we still conduct trials in the inheritance of magic ability using, let us say, natural methods. The result of these pseudo-experiments far too often can be seen in the gutters of our cities and begging outside our temple walls. Far too often we see and encounter brain-dead and moronic women covered in their own spittle and passing themselves off as prophetesses, seers, village diviners, and miracle workers. Cretins with brains degenerated by the uncontrolled power they inherited. These simpletons and fools can themselves breed, can pass on their abilities, and continue the degeneration. Is anyone capable of foreseeing or defining what the last link in such a chain will look like? Most of us mages lose the ability to procreate as a result of changes and disruptions to the functioning of our pituitary glands. Others, sorceresses most often, mature into their magic powers with gonads intact. They can conceive and give birth, and have the audacity to consider that good fortune a blessing. Yet, I repeat, no one is born a mage, and no one should be. Aware of the gravity of what I write, I provide an answer to the question posed at the summit in Sidaris. I answer with every certitude. Each of us must decide what she wants to be, a sorceress or a mother. The Witcher 2, Count Maravel's Correspondence. Your Excellency, I am happy to report that Anais, Foltest's bastard daughter, has been handed over to the Kedwenis in Your Excellency's name as per our agreement. The girl is now under the sorcerer Deathmold's care, and he appeared to be more than pleased with the gift. I trust that since I have concluded my end of the matter, I can now expect swift closure thereof on Your Excellency's part. Sadly, not all went as planned. Foltest's bastard son Busi perished through a series of unfortunate coincidences. Yet when dealing with such complex situations rife with unforeseen circumstances, one must be prepared to risk certain losses. I mourn for the lad, yet I trust Your Excellency will see the advantages of this turn of events. Besides, can one really expect to cheat fate? Your Excellency's faithful servant, Count Maravel. The Witcher 3, The Curious Cases of Virtuous Vegga. Can there be such a thing as a virtuous whore? Vegga asked herself this question each and every morning, and each morning swore she would prove to the world that practicing the world's oldest profession does not preclude virtue. That determination augmented not only to her own troubles, but also those of Gaspard de Bruel, her mother's longtime friend, who, as a personal favor, had hired Vegga to work in his establishment, the Golden Garter. Poor Gaspard had to listen to the constant complaints of customers who would charge into his office in a huff about Vegga's behavior. Yet the girl clung firm to her principles and her ironclad drive to see them through. She would never perform with any lights lit, and would avert her gaze with a powerful blush upon catching sight of the male member. Gaspard's greatest headache, however, was the fact that virtuous Vegga never, ever accepted any payment for her services. The Witcher 3, Naransen, son of Gunnestad. When he awoke, he saw before him an endless swath of blue. On the horizon, the sky merged with the glassy sea. The storm had passed. So had the longship and all its crew. He never learned how long he had lain unconscious in the lifeboat. The sun had scorched his skin a purplish red and turned his lips to brittle parchment. He was overcome by a great thirst, but there was nothing on the boat with which to quench it. Had he been spared from so much only to die now? No. Naransen was the son of the great Gunnestad, and he would never give up. He had had 20 springs under his belt when he embarked on this voyage. When was that? Long ago. Very long ago. Back when his friends still lived. When he still had his left hand, not this stiff stump. When his beard was still red and not streaked with silver. The drive for glory which had driven him from his family home had demanded a high price. Naransen had never given that a second thought, but now, alone in a lifeboat in the middle of an endless ocean, he felt tired. He wanted to once again set eyes on the farm on which he had been raised, to see the eyes of his mother, who had lulled him to sleep with tales of the deeds of the legendary heroes. Now he had become one of them. Now mothers would tell their sons about him. His greatest dream had become a reality. He should have been happy, but he wasn't. Perhaps if he had known then what travails and hardships awaited him. Yet no man can know his future. One thing is sure, however. Even if Naransen had known what horrors this life had in store for him, he never would have chosen another. He was the son of the great Gunnestad, and he had walked the path of glory, from which one can never stray, no matter the cost. The Witcher 3, Golem, or man's most faithful servant. Despite what you might have heard, the first golem was created not by a powerful mage or an elven sage, but by a simple dwarf from Maribor named Bonaventura Sesto, a brickmaker. The fateful act of creation took place over a century ago, when the persecution of non-humans was in full swing in Maribor. Elves and dwarves had been accused of bringing an epidemic to the city, though it was later discovered the outbreak had been caused by a man named Matteo, a barkeep's dog's body at the Golden Goose Inn. This Matteo was charged with both serving meals and cleaning the latrines, and would only wash his hands once a month, and then not very thoroughly. The rest, as they say, is history. The persecutions of non-humans was limited at first to robbing their shops, arson, and the occasional beating, but the violence soon escalated into a bloody pogrom. As the city guard looked on without lifting a finger, humans murdered elves and dwarves during 3 days and 3 nights of slaughter, killing over 300 individuals, including the aforementioned Bonaventura Sesto's entire family. Driven mad with grief and thirsting for vengeance, Bonaventura molded a 10-foot-tall humanoid out of clay, and then carved the names of the slain non-humans onto it, along with a smattering of dwarven curses. Once finished, he slit his own throat, and when his blood splattered the gigantic statue, it came alive and started walking towards the city. Bonaventura had his sweet revenge on his persecutors. His creation killed almost 500 humans, including the mayor and the entire city council, before the soldiers of the city garrison could take it out using their ballista. The Conclave's later investigation found that Bonaventura had possessed hidden magic talent. Though he had never had any training, this torrent of powerful emotions running through him at the time of his death flushed out his latent powers and created from them a new spell. After numerous alterations and improvements, one can now cast the spell without sacrificing one's own life, and golems guard laboratories, libraries, and palaces across the continent. The Witcher 2. Report for Thaler. Report for the Temerian Secret Service. I've no idea who's the worst liar, Laredo or his kin Merce, brought here to the office of Castellan after the scandal in Viziman. Not one thing in their reports is true. Dimitri's alive, the elves are well off, Yorvith has not left and even has made a deal with some witcher. Furthermore, it seems Laredo brought some remnants of the Salamandra here to traffic in Fizztech for him, as if the money he gets from fraud is not enough. The question of why the commander isn't afraid of the capital's wrath begs an answer, even excluding the fact that Laredo uses the chaos caused by Foltest's death to his advantage. He's plotting high treason. I have no idea what his goal is, and I have no intention of finding out. Send a real spy here, it doesn't suit my nerves. Earwig. The Witcher 1. Elder Blood. Elder Blood by Vilgefortz of Roggeveen. It is impossible to accurately trace the genes of Loredoran. The fates of entire generations are lost to time, their picture further distorted by unclear lineages, bastard children, intentional historical falsification, and a simple lack of records. In many cases, Elder Blood is too thin and has lost its power. Moreover, not every source attributes their magical skills to the presence of Lara's genes. A few, in whom the mutation has occurred, are marked by extraordinary abilities. They are able to travel through time and space and possess certain magical abilities. These talents are, however, wild and uncontrolled, manifesting themselves in times of stress or strong emotions, surprising even their possessors. History knows of travelers flung far in time and space by their own abilities. That is why the Brotherhood of Sorcerers should take special care of Source children, raise them under its watchful eyes. The Witcher 1. Foreign Lands. Foreign Lands by Mark O. Knopf. The Nilfgaardian Empire is gigantic. It was once but a single realm that went on to conquer neighboring lands and assimilate their populations. Today, all who hail from the south are called Nilfgaardians, though some take offense as they have sought to preserve their national identity. Nilfgaard is ruled by a tyrannical emperor. He tolerates no opposition and knows no pity. Some call him the White Flame dancing on his enemies' barrows. His symbol, and the Empire's, is a silver sun on a black background. It is worth noting that the female ruler of the Valley of Flowers, the sole existing elven state, considers herself a vassal of the Emperor. The Witcher 2. The Great Book of Herbs. Witchers possess extensive knowledge of herbs as they use them to brew potions. Useful plants can be found almost anywhere. Of course, herbs are more plentiful wherever the vegetation is lush. Quantities of harvested herbs increase as abilities from the alchemical path are acquired. The Witcher's Medallion is also very helpful. Using it reveals all useful herbs in the vicinity. The Witcher 2. Falsified orders changing the convoy's route. Falsified letter, purportedly from Kimbolt to the convoy commander. Honorable Sir, I'm the last man who would tell others how to do their job. knowing even less about leading convoys than about carpentry, and I hasten to inform you that I deal with wooden items only in the privy. However, with the safety of Foltest's children in mind, I must warn you and suggest a change to your course. The original route proved to be very dangerous and ridden with brigands, a fact that we, traveling ahead of you on the trail, experienced personally. Constable Natalis himself was lightly wounded by a treacherous arrow. Due to the importance of those in your care, and the responsibility resting upon your shoulders, I suggest you travel through Starling Valley. Rest at the local tavern, then follow the Old Trail, which Foltest successfully rid of robbers in his time. Remember, should anything happen to those in your care, their blood shall be on your hands. Kimbolt.
The Witcher 3. Griffin in the Highlands. Read close if you want to earn good coin and help your fellow man. In the hills north of Crow's Perch, there's some sort of beast lurking about. A griffin, it would seem. If you kill it, bring the trophy to the quartermaster of Crow's Perch, and you'll get a fitting reward. And if you don't give a whit about your fellow men and don't have the bollocks to face a griffin, stay far away from that place, or else you'll end up as the beast's dinner. Which I suppose means if you're feeling suicidal, you can go right ahead, waltz up to the monster and end your sorry life. Quartermaster of Crow's Perch.
The Witcher 1. Fairy Tales and Stories. Fairy Tales and Stories by Florence Delanoy. Then the fairy said to the Witcher, I will tell you what to do. Put on a pair of iron shoes, pick up an iron staff. Walk in the iron shoes to the end of the world. Put the ground before you with the staff and sprinkle it with tears. Walk through fire and water. Do not stop, do not look back. And when your shoes wear out, and when your iron staff shatters, when the wind and the heat dry your eyes so you cannot shed another tear, then you will have reached the world's end, and you will have found what you seek, what you love, perhaps. And so the Witcher walked through fire and water without looking back, but he took neither the iron shoes nor the staff. He took only his witch's sword. He did not heed the words of the fairy, and that's a good thing, because she was an evil fairy. The Witcher 3. Gwent. Vimme Vivaldi cheats. To all Gwent players, the dwarven banker Vimme Vivaldi is a villain and a cheat. Using typical non-human trickery, he conned his way to victory over me, then forthwith demanded I surrender all my cards without the slightest consolation or giving me the chance for a rematch. Anyone tempted to play with him, resist or regret. A well-wisher. The Witcher 3. Interrogation Report. Location, Amavet Fortress. Persons taking part, Sir Ignatius Verrières, Bart the Bailiff, Andreas Bloom, Sir Ignatius's underlings, Carmi, Gardi, and Belzy. Suspect, Colgrim, Witcher of the Viper School. The Witcher Colgrim stands accused of kidnapping Vitti, son of Paul, a beekeeper residing in White Orchard. Suspect was detained pending trial. Upon detention, he was searched and a diagram for the forging of a steel sword was found on his person. It is suspected this sword was used to intimidate or possibly kill the kidnapped child. It is likewise suspected that the accused possesses other such diagrams for the forging of death-dealing implements, though none have been found to date. Sir Ignatius has requested the Witcher undergo preliminary interrogation with the application of torture. This will take place once a torturer with the proper qualifications has been found. Addendum. It was later discovered drowners were responsible for the boy's disappearance. Unfortunately, Colgrim died before this information reached the investigators. Rather than face the baronet's judgment, he chose trial by ordeal. Sir Ignatius agreed, and he ordered he cleanse the Verrières family crypt of spectres. Colgrim never emerged from said crypt. It is highly likely the motley wraiths, spectres, and evil powers residing therein proved too much for him. The Witcher 3. The Lonesome World Guide to Undvik. Once prospering Undvik was the second, after Ardskellig, most frequently visited isle in the archipelago. Among its ample charms are a prime location, picturesque scenery, and a sublime local cuisine. Sadly, the isle was recently devastated when some monstrous frosty giant awoke from his long slumber and began murdering and destroying whatever lay at hand. After this occurrence, many realms issued an official edict of warning cautioning their residents to avoid travel to Undvik. Nevertheless, the isle still attracts many travelers. They are no longer primarily lovers of carefree relaxation, however. Instead, they're adventure seekers and mercenaries hoping to earn the bounty put on the giant's head, or barring that, at least get a glimpse of this fantastic creature with their own eyes. Though this is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to witness such a sight, we are duty-bound to advise anyone thinking of visiting Undvik to postpone their trip until conditions improve, or, even better, alter their plans and visit one of Skellige's many other attractive isles, where the risk of being disemboweled by a colossal man-beast is significantly lower. The Witcher 3. The Treatment of Furuncles Through Cauterization, a Study. Everyone's seen a boil, usually more than they'd care to. These deformities don't just mar your beauty, they can be signs of disease, or even the disease's cause and epicenter. If your lungs wheeze and your heart flutters, or if you're just sick of pustules, you can carve them off and be free of this ill for good. When you carve off a boil, use a sharp knife which you've had a dog lick thoroughly beforehand, for a dog's tongue works wonders on healing wounds. You've got to be brave as you go about it, slicing as confidently and steadily as if carving off a hunk of cheese. Then quickly cauterize the resultant wound using a red-hot poker. Don't pay any mind to screams or tears. Pus, bile, and any other humours need to be gathered in a basin, then dumped in a pit, and the pit covered, else the illness might return. The Witcher 1. Ain Soph Aur. Ain Soph Aur. 10 worldly elements, 10 cornerstones. All emerged from these 10. Seeker, lift your eyes, search your past, and you shall find. He who knows your course holds wisdom, and will share it when asked. Another has gained uncountable riches, yet has compassion in his heart. Your heart, in turn, does not harbour love, but it is with one who knows mercy, one able to love. Once blind, now plunge into your mind, your memory. Dark and dangerous is the path from enslavement to the promised kingdom. A goddess thrice over, virgin, mother, old woman. 3 faces, 3 graces, understanding, power, glory, achievable through sacrifice and prayer. The foundation lies in the deep. Do not be tempted by the errant fires. Defeat death, and you will be rewarded. Victory is gained only by fighting its sentry. He who leads through labyrinthine mysteries will offer you the crown of consciousness. At your path's end, awareness will be yours. You will comprehend. What is locked will open before you. The 10 names are Wisdom, Chokmah, Understanding, Vinah, Love, Kezath, Compassion, Tipperoth, Power, Gevroth, Victory, Netza, Glory, Oath, Foundation, Yesath, Kingdom, Malkad, Crown, Kethar. The Witcher 2, Magic and Power. Sorcerer is the name customarily applied to male persons capable of commanding the power, though it is but one of many of the terms or phrases, most of them highly unflattering, to have been used over the ages. These terms have ranged from the rather respectful title of Wise One to the somewhat less specific Bloody Son of a Bitch, the Plague Take 'em. As for women of this persuasion, that is, sorceresses, they have been called everything from Archmistress to a colloquial expression I will not repeat out of regard for the language and respect for the female gender. The command of the power these mages possess sets them above mere mortals, which can be good or bad. From the dawn of time, history remembers mages either as pure-intentioned and courageous heroes, or as rogues, bereft of reverence and faith. Human memory tends to remember the latter for longer, which may be why common folk mostly hold people of this profession in contempt. The Witcher 2, the Immortelle, or the Dwarven Herb. The Dwarven Immortelle. The Dwarven Immortelle is called the Devil's Tail by the dwarves themselves, and Fain Icair, that is, the sun's blood, by the elves. The plant has powerful medicinal properties, but is relatively unknown and extremely rare. According to elven legend, an archer once managed to pierce the sun with an arrow. The sun's blood dripped from the sky, sinking into the ground so deeply that it penetrated ancient hollows in the rock. This herb may be today found in places where the blood settled. That account may or may not be apocryphal, but it's a fact that the Immortelle is sought after as an ingredient for antidotes and beauty elixirs. It grows in caves and old mines, for it does not require sunlight, and that is why it's described as dwarven. The Witcher 1, Hymns of Madness and Despair. Hymns of Madness and Despair, by Philip Ward. I tell you, when the sleeper awakens, dawn will come for the children of the deep. I tell you it is I am the doom of the world, I am its hope. The unjust walk a straight path, my paths are unknown. The lips of the unjust are caked with filth, I am the cleansing. The unjust bow before false lords and will be tramped to the ground, for who is above the lords? The Witcher 1, Tower Mage's Book. Tower Mage's Book written by himself. Regardless of all his madness, Alzur managed to arrive at some surprising results. He came to the conclusion that he would discover the secrets of animating inanimate matter when he learned to animate energy. According to Alzur, a golem would work only when filled with living power that would imitate a divine pneuma, a soul. The wizard did not have a chance to finish his research, but his experiments revealed the secret of the thunder and shield spells. Alzur was able to summon living lightning capable of locating and following its target, and a living shield capable of releasing such lightning. The fools would only see his discoveries as weapons, even more powerful than the V of Maribor or the infamous Koche. However, I can clearly see that Alzur's thunder is yet another step on the path leading to creating a perfect being. The Witcher 3. The Conjunction of the Spheres. Scholars have many vices. Possibly the worst among them is a tendency to describe the simple in unnecessarily complex terms, to dress the plain in the garb of false learning. The Conjunction of the Spheres might serve as an excellent example of this. The name, so mysterious to a commoner's ear, could be replaced with much simpler alternative, when worlds collided. The phenomenon itself can also be explained in terms simple enough for a child to understand. Imagine, dear reader, that our world is a ship sailing on a great sea. From its deck we can see other distant vessels. Those are the stars. Those vessels each bear their own goods and their own crews. They usually pass us at some distance, barely visible specks even viewed through a spyglass. Once every few thousand years, however, a storm breaks above this cosmic sea, a storm so strong it tosses the ships towards one another, making them sail cheek by jowl. Part of the crew of one ship can, at such times, move to another, and some of the cargo from one ship's hold can spill into a neighboring vessel. When the weather calms, the ships separate once again and sail their separate, invariably different ways. The so-called post-conjunction beings, namely monsters such as ghouls and basilisks, are precisely such passengers from another vessel. And we humans are castaways, flung against our will from somewhere far away, onto a world previously inhabited by the elder races. Once here, we learn the arcane mysteries of magic, unbeknownst to us before. Could the worlds collide once more? Perhaps. Can this cataclysm be avoided, or the opposite, hastened? Some scholars believe there are beings who have mastered this skill, who possess rare genes which allow some to seize the helm of our vessel and steer us to safer waters or to our doom. The Witcher 3. The White Frost. One can hear Ithleen's prophecy whispered at every market, garbled and reused by every village witch, delved into in any treatise touching on sooths and diviners, and in general saturating our common culture. We all know that the time of the wolf-splitted approaches the time of the white frost, and that the world will perish amidst ice. But few truly understand the meaning of these words. The self-proclaimed prophets who shout out Ithleen's words mistake stars reflected in a still pond for the sky. For the white frost is no legend or mythical apocalypse. It is a natural phenomenon that can be described in the dry yet precise language of scholarship. The renowned scholar of Thorne's studies have clearly shown that our world is not the center of the universe, but one of 1,000 such globes spinning in the endless darkness of space. This space is usually described as a vacuum, yet to do so is grossly misleading. For through this vacuum swims, invisible to the naked eye, the white frost. We do not know exactly what the white frost is, perhaps a microscopic dust that blocks the incoming light of the sun, perhaps infinitesimal particles of the sort postulated by Democritus of Banard, with the unusual property of sucking up warmth as a sponge does water. We know for a certainty, however, that, thanks to the telescopic observations of elven astronomers, the white frost, whatever it is, has already destroyed a great many worlds. The star systems in which it appears perish into lifeless hunks of ice over the course of a few decades. Furthermore, each scholar is agreed that the white frost will one day come to our world. Ithleen's prophecy, though based on magic intuition and not scientific observation, thus appears to foretell the truth. Many mages are skeptical about the theses presented here. I recommend they carry out the same experiment I have conducted in my own laboratory. Using the spell Portus Asterum, open a microscopic portal for 3.5 seconds to the coordinates 03314890 8927 0934. Yet before you do, dressed in your warmest furs and ready an axe for breaking through thick ice. The Witcher 3. Pearls of the North. Novigrad. No one can claim to have traveled the northern realms who has not been to Novigrad. If I were forced to list what, during my many meanderings, has made the greatest impression on me, it would be precisely this great and yet at the same time free city. A metropolis worthy of the empire, its only flaw is that the civilization Nilfgaard carries within her has not yet enlightened it. That is why hordes of reactionary cultists of the Eternal Fire dwell in the midst of its excellent buildings and superb commercial infrastructure. One feels as though superstition is how the local hierarch and his temple guards cement their power over the city dwellers, and many they are to control, for the city counts no less than 30,000 of inhabitants. While strolling through its fabulous port, surrounded by marvels of architecture, it's hard to imagine that centuries ago Novigrad was a mere minor elven townstead. When the city fell into the hands of the Nordlings, its problems grew exponentially, for it is well known that the people of the north can do a great many things, but peaceful and orderly cohabitation is not one of them. And so Novigrad first belonged to Redania, then fell under Temerian rule, until finally, after endless compromises and bargains, it at last became a free city. But is the city truly free? I dare to doubt it. Redanian influence makes itself felt too strongly on every street corner, and the fact that the city is located within Radovid's territory speaks for itself. While wandering the city streets, I came across 4 watermills, 8 banks, and nearly 19 pawn shops. There are also a great many houses of simple pleasures, such as taverns and brothels, and Novigrad's commitment to matters of faith is borne witness to by the fact that the city contains no less than, I kid you not, 19 temples to the Eternal Fire. What more can be said? I think Novigrad has all the makings of the capital of the world, and perhaps that is what it will one day become. First, however, someone needs to bring order to within her walls.
The Witcher 1, Transmutations and Metamorphoses, by Adalbertus Aloysius Kalkstein. To follow the example of the sorcerer from the tower, we first need to classify substances, dividing them into superior and inferior varieties. Only the former can be described by the theory of interdependence presented here. Inferior substances do not produce a chain of quasi-life structures, for their nature is substandard in quality, and they cannot exist independently. However, it has been proven that they are paradoxically essential for the chain to exist in spite of their inferiority. The hypothesis of interdependence assumes that the chain of quasi-life must contain one substance of each superior element. Nonetheless, the chain's structure, proposed by Raffard the White, has one too few places for them, namely only 5. If the chain were transposed and then transmuted, the problem would easily be solved. Alas, the first operation cannot be performed without damage to the chain's integrity. The only solution is to use a so-called reverse transmutation, which will eventually cause the chain to rotate. As a result of rotation, all 6 superior substances will constantly leave and join the chain without destroying it. From the holistic point of view, there will always be 6 superior substances occupying 5 places. The ingenuity of this solution lies in the chain having all the qualities of the 3 inferior substances. Thus, the paradox of interdependence, or as some say, coexistence, is no longer a problem. Unfortunately, since none of the modern works describe how to perform reverse transmutation, the problem of animating the inanimate remains unresolved. The Witcher 2, Baron Lavalette, Interrogation Report. Record of Mary Louisa Lavalette's interrogation. The preparations were completed without interruption. Louisa Lavalette remained silent throughout. In accordance with custom, the unkind master presented the tools he would use. The Baroness merely clenched her teeth and observed a dignified silence. With the initial procedures completed, I began the interrogation proper. I asked the subject questions from my Lord Baron's list, however I failed to extract satisfactory answers. After consulting the unkind master, I decided that the subject was not fully ready. We then placed her upon the rack. After some time, I asked my Lord Baron's questions again. Joachim Pyle, Bailiff. The Witcher 2, The Legendary Accursed. The Draug is a mythical creature, straight from the ancient legends of heroes and epic deeds. When the hero enters the burning hells to rescue his beloved, or when he has to avenge his father's death, the Draug is often his opponent. Why are poets so keen to cast this monster as the archenemy? Well, the Draug is a wraith, so it fits any dark story featuring a curse or vengeance from the beyond. There's no telling what it actually looks like, so its terrifying visage can be described in many ways without risking accusation of confabulation. Furthermore, it is a powerful creature, a prince of the damned, so it makes an ideal villain. The Witcher 3, Aeramas Notes. The vision stabilized, and lo and behold, I saw as if through a moonlit haze the 4 princes, each clad in armor and astride a horse. The first rode a steed the color of fog, the second of sulphur, the third black as the abyss, and the fourth a pony. And then I beheld a fountain, a clear spring, but the princes did not drink of it, for it was forbidden. And then a bird of paradise, shining in ruby and gold, flew above them and alit upon a branch of a tree.
and the tree had arms numbering 1,040. "Draw from the source," said the bird, but they pointed to the sun's bloody tears and did not draw. And then a pure virgin appeared with bared breast, exposing her modest bosoms, ruddy and firm like ripe lindenberries. And then my nose became accustomed to the aroma, and the vision passed. Tomorrow I shall try to unseal that well-aged sample from Geno Myvort. It is said to have a refined, deep scent with a slightly nutty aftertaste. Well, we shall see.
The Witcher 3. Innkeep's Notes. That was right before dusk. Then a Witcher showed, dirty and unshaven and stinking worse than a fisherman from Faro. Asked for a room and a bucket of water so he could freshen up some. First I didn't want to let him in, on account of the bloody sack he was carrying, but then it came out he had arranged to meet Jorgen Ironhand here, and a friend of Jorgen's a friend of mine. Sun had long set by the time Jorgen showed. Witcher handed him that sack, and we all learned why it stank so bad. Inside was the head of a siren. Jorgen had contracted the Witcher to take it down after it attacked some folk in a cave in the northwestern part of Speakerog. Seeing it dead cheered folk awful fast, and Jorgen, happy as a clam, started buying everyone drinks. The Witcher refrained at first, saying he was off to take care of a strigger that had infested the ruins of a fortress on the northern edge of the isle, but in the end he gave in. After all, there's no refusing Jorgen. Made a lovely heap of coin that day, for the sun started rising and not a man had gone home. The Witcher got drunk with Jorgen and started telling us tales. Then we sat down for some Gwent. That Gerd, he might be a first-class warrior, but he's one lousy card player. Lost half his reward for that siren to me, and drank the other half. Then wanting to win it back, he wagered a diagram for some kind of steel sword. To my eye, it was a scrap of rubbish. But, some things you gotta do for the sake of sportsmanship and camaraderie, so I accepted the wager.
The Witcher 3, Pearls of the North, Oxenfurt. Oxenfurt, a gem snuggling into the bosom of the Pontar to the east of Novigrad. A cradle erected upon Redanian soil, nurturing the greatest minds not only of that kingdom, but of all the north. To walk its hallowed academy's halls is to embark on a journey through learning, from the finest points of philosophy to the grandest strokes of art, with stops made to admire architecture and dissect medicine along the way. Peer to either side, and you will spy fellow travelers in your pilgrimage of learning, the students. They throng Oxenfurt's streets, lending it an indelible imprint of youth that can be felt the moment you pass through its gates. Dormitories stand cheek by jowl, booksellers hawk used tomes on every corner, and under every tree fresh faces debate poetry with passion. Yet youth is not all slate and compass, and the young here shirk none of its other typical pastimes. Raucous and merry are the city streets, both by day and even more so by night. Though the city councillors have forbidden the sale of alcohol after dusk, no one seems eager to enforce this with stricture, and wisely so, for any loss of sleep is more than made up for by the gains, profits to fatten its innkeepers' pockets, and the late-night crooning of troubadours to enrich its soul. As for architecture, of particular note are the recently renovated elven aqueducts used to clean the city sewers. They stand as witness to the city's innovative spirit. You will not find their like in all the civilized world. Yet dominating the town's architectural visage like a glistening crown is the complex of buildings that comprises the Oxenfurt Academy. Few today remember that these edifices, constructed by the elves, predate the city itself. It is the institution that named the city, not vice versa. Today, Oxenfurt Academy enjoys a reputation matched only by the Imperial Academy of Nilfgaard. Of greatest renown, the departments of alchemy, natural history, minstrelsy and poetry, medicine and herbology, engineering, and, last but certainly not least, philosophy. The Witcher 2, the Conclave of Mages. The Conclave was, next to the Supreme Council of Sorcerers, one of the two main bodies ruling the magicians. The most powerful sorcerers of their time sat on it. One of its duties was regulating the standards and rules of using magic. The ban on necromancy was one of its edicts. Before the Thaler Rebellion, a large part of the Conclave conspired with Nilfgaard. During those events, most of its members died, the sole survivor being Francesca Finderbeyer. After the coup, the Conclave was not reactivated. Thus, many mages do not respect the restrictions it had created. The Witcher 2, the Viziman Uprising. The events known under that name took place not long after the Witcher mysteriously came back. The leader of the Order of the Flaming Rose, Jacques de Aldersberg, made plans to build a new, better world under his own leadership. Using the power he had over the Order and fanning the conflict with the Scoia'tael until it threatened the city itself, he marched against King Foltest at the head of an army of mutated creatures. The battles that took place in the city between the Order, the Scoia'tael, and the troops loyal to the king are remembered as the Vizima Rebellion. Though historians cannot agree on their opinion of these events, the fact is that Foltest managed to contain the situation, and the rebellion ended. The Witcher 3, After the White Frost. Spring ash down dreamy hills, past sparkling waters, Tir-Nar Liard drifts, slowly, softly, silently, into oblivion. Sage lips blacken, frosted bones quiver, before an icebound eye can blink. In distant skies, I will watch your descent. The Witcher 2, The Conjunction of the Spheres. There are scores of learned works, dissertations, and treatises about this magical cataclysm from about 1500 years ago. Because of this event, creatures never seen before entered our world, and still do not have their own ecological niche here. Among others, gravies and ghouls are relics of the permeation of the spheres, though elven tradition has it that we humans are also newcomers from that time. The sorcerers claim that humanity received both the wondrous gift and the terrible curse that they consider magic to be at that time. The Witcher 3, The Mage Alexander's Log, Part 1. Day 237. My experiments continue to return results I must consider unreliable. Methodological errors are not at fault. The problem lies in the shoddy and fallible research material I'm forced to work with. Despite his prior assurance, Viscerad is unable to provide me with enough moderately healthy specimens for my tests. Most of the material is starved and terrified, having been dragged down here straight from the dungeon. I waste a great deal of time daily washing and delousing them before I will so much as let them step foot into my laboratory. Sterility first. As Marty Sodergren managed to prove in her little-known work, the attitude of a patient undergoing treatment can have a significant impact on the battle against the disease. Unfortunately, the volunteers with which I am supplied do not show significant comprehension, let alone enthusiasm, for the noble work in which they are taking part. In fact, it seems they consider the research part of their punishment. I've tried a few times, though I am but a poor speaker, to convince them they are contributing to the eradication of one of the greatest plagues tormenting mankind. I had the distinct impression they understood little, but perhaps their stupor was merely the result of the early stages of the illness. Of course, it is impossible to achieve success without significant sacrifices. The overwhelming majority of them will have to lay down their trifling lives on the altar of learning, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. The Witcher 3, The Mage Alexander's Log, Part 2. Day 346. I never did like rats, not because of their obscene tales, but rather on account of their lively, disturbing intelligence. They're always listening when a man believes he is talking only to himself, and what's worse, they seem to understand. A few days ago I caught myself talking to one of them, a particularly large black male with a torn-off ear. At first I was overcome by panic. Was this a first manifestation of the illness? Of course that was impossible, for I had fortified my immunity with powerful spells. Upon further consideration I concluded it was an altogether natural reflex, one even the most learned among us find hard to restrain. We mages like to be listened to. I placed the black rat in a separate cage. The time will come for it to play a part in the test. Meanwhile, it can keep me company. And observe. I've noticed it looks with great concentration at the cages of its infected brethren, particularly those cages in the last stages of illness. Fascinating. Speaking of company, I have none, besides the black rat, and cannot hope for better. Viscerad avoids the laboratory, and has expressed his desire for his daughter to steer clear of me as well. At first I thought he feared a moral scandal, which would be risible in the extreme, but he explained the true reason in due course. It seems Annabelle has always possessed a fragile psychic constitution. Observing the ill might throw her into foul humors. The peasants taking part in the study have stopped speaking to me. I don't know what they believe this little act of defiance will serve. It does me no harm. They made for lousy conversation partners. There remains, of course, the woman, but as for her I tried to limit my contact. Day 362. My black rat has died. Today I found him curled up in his cage. I suspected he had become infected on accident, but during the autopsy I did not uncover any signs of illness. He was also perfectly well fed. Strange. From a medical point of view, his death remains unexplained, something which, I must admit, irritates the scholar in me. But as mentioned previously, I'm not particularly fond of rats. The Witcher 3, Kovir and Poviss. Kovir and Poviss are without a doubt the richest realms in the north. Viewed today, remember that this was not always the case. Yet their poverty was once literally on everyone's lips, in the form of now antiquated common sayings. As recently as the days of Herbert the Quarrelsome, one spoke of a particularly impoverished person as being poorer than a mouse from Poviss, called bone broth Koviri delight, and referred to beggars as Praxides, after the bay along the shores of which these kingdoms lie. Similarly, few remember that a mere handful of generations ago, Kovir and Poviss were still part of Redania. King Radovid I, known as Radovid the Great, handed dominion over them to his hated brother Troidan, with one stipulation, that he never leave his newly acquired domain and not interfere with matters of state. Handing over this rocky scrap of far northern ground, where, the saying went, the year had 2 seasons, August and winter, was naturally meant as a cruel joke, a slap in the face for the overambitious Troidan. Yet time soon proved that Radovid the Great had made a grave error. Before long it was discovered that Kovir's bare rocks hid priceless treasure in the form of enormous deposits of precious metals and rock salt. This discovery in turn led to tremendous growth in productive industry. Mills, forges, and workshops sprouted up like mushrooms after a heavy rain. Radovid III decided to correct his famous forebear's mistake and take back the northern frontiers of his kingdom. He was convinced that the combined armies of Redania and its then ally Kedwin would quickly bring the ever more audacious vassal in line. History took a different turn, however, and Kovir won a resounding, crushing victory. Radovid III was forced to sign the first treaty of Lan Exeter, granting Kovir independence while binding it to eternal neutrality, a promise Troidan's successors have kept with great diligence. Until recently, Kovir was ruled by Esterad Tyson, a king as wise as he was greedy, yet his untimely demise did not stop his lands from continuing to develop and blossom. Koviri metallurgists proudly compete with the best Mahakam can offer, and many believe the University of Lan Exeter long ago surpassed the famous Oxenford Academy as the leading seat of higher learning in the north. And so it has come to pass that over the course of a few generations, the inhabitants of Kovir and Poviss have turned from paupers into princes, from beggars into bankers. The Witcher 2, The Rudiments of Pathomorphology, by Milo van der Beek. The world should finally understand that examining the dead can save the living. We owe the dead respect, that is true, and that is exactly why such examinations should only be done by doctors or students under the watchful eyes of their professors. In further sections of this work, I describe how a respectful dissection should be conducted, and what tools should be used to reach the truth with proper respect for the deceased. The Witcher 2, The Wars for Upper Eddon. The part of Eddon that lies between the Pontar and Dyfni rivers is called Lormark or Upper Eddon, depending on the interested party's political persuasion. These lands have been disputed for ages, with Kedwin laying claim to them as well. During the last war with Nilfgaard, Eddon found itself in deep trouble, fighting an uneven battle to repel the onslaught of the Black Ones in the south. Sensing that its southern neighbor would ultimately bow to the invaders, Kedwin, Eddon's ostensible ally in that conflict, sent its armies into Lormark, annexing the region. Several days later, Margrave Mansfeld of Ardcarrag and Marshal Menno Cohorn, commander-in-chief of the Nilfgaardian army, greeted each other on a bridge spanning the Dyfni River. They shook hands over the bleeding, tortured corpse of the Kingdom of Eddon, sealing a criminal partitioning of plundered lands. And even though Kedwin restored Lormark to Eddon after the war, its taking of the territory with Nilfgaardian support was one of the most disgraceful acts in history. The Witcher 3, Behind the Great Veil. Of the many demons which reside in the outer spheres, Heims are among the most dangerous. Other demons usually must take on concrete living form, be it of man or beast. Heims, on the other hand, appear in our world in their own immaterial form, which is invisible to all save their chosen victim. Heims feed on fear, regret, a sense of guilt, in a word, on negative emotions. And since they're eternally hungry, they provoke these emotions in the humans they torment. These demons cannot be exorcised. A man a Heim takes as a victim is lost and will inevitably succumb to madness, and then death. The Witcher 3, Journal from the Moldavie Residence. What a lovely home! I cannot believe we were able to buy it so cheaply. Valeria always had a keen mind for business. She haggled so fiercely the broker dropped his price by a third. Incredible. Valeria says the room layout is exceptionally well conceived. Tomorrow we will move all our things in. It'll be good to have our own place. Finally, some peace and quiet. Once we had arranged all the furniture, Valeria decided we needed to paint the walls yellow. Perhaps that is for the best. It will make it more cozy. Valeria's mother visited us. Tomorrow, I shall paint the walls green. Valeria heard some noises during the night. She woke me several times, but I did not hear a thing. This night I heard them. The walls shook. Valeria has learned from the neighbors that previously a powerful mage resided in this home. They all say he would summon demons, and his spirit still haunts its rooms. People will believe the most outlandish nonsense. Valeria has decided to move back in with her mother for some time, until I do something about the walls. I joked that perhaps I could simply repaint them, but I don't think she found that amusing. The plaster has begun to fall off. It seems to me that I heard a noise last night, something like a muffled roar. Valeria has returned. She found a buyer for the home, avoided any suspicion by claiming to be the mage's widow, selling off the estate after her husband's unfortunate death at the stake. Fool Count must think he has found himself an incredible bargain. The Witcher 3, Drusus the Hermit's Notes. For years and years I succeeded in living a quiet life, far from the stink and cry of the big city. When I entered this voluntary exile, I left the whole world behind and hoped it would do the same to me. Yet lately I have noticed someone observing me. Times are unsettled. War turns men into wild beasts. I suspect it is not a friendly neighbor keeping an eye on me. Barilka, the only companion in my solitude, stands by the door at night and barks. What has happened to Alexis, Hector, Gizmo, Dex? Hunger drives men to do the worst. Perhaps bandits now prowl the areas. Fools, they know I have nothing. Tomorrow I will attempt to explain everything to them. The Witcher 2, Margot's Letter to Yorvith. Contrary to your claims, Einar Gossel is no collaborator. He yields to Laredo only as much as it is necessary, and is never servile. Luis Merce, however, should be a target. He's kin of some sort to the commander, brought here from gods know where, and has become the most important cog in the bureaucratic machine. He dances to that old bag Clovis's tune. You should get her too. I have a personal score to settle with her. Those from Lobendin are all right, don't touch them. I suggest you make contact with Anezka. People have grown used to her trips into the forest. She could carry messages and nobody would notice. I think she might be a witch. At the very least, she helps my girls whenever they get into trouble. Someone will try to lynch her sooner or later, so you may offer her protection in exchange for her aid. And I've no idea what to think about Malena. The Witcher 2, a hog named Henselt. Yet Henselt courts the Imperial envoy like a cheap whore who has singled out a burger with a full pouch at the brothel. Keep in mind that a whore can let anyone she wishes plow her. Her ass, her choice. The king owes us more. His ass belongs to all of us, and its name is Kedwin. Dare we allow a Nilfgaardian prick to plow our country? As my friend who is a witcher says, if that's what the world needs to be saved, perhaps it would be better that it perish. The Witcher 3, Polymorphy. To change form, to shape one's matter as clay, this is no novice's trick, no flickering glowlight or rat-killing blue bolt. Only those with bowels soaked in oceans of magic arcana, and few are born with bowels so absorbent, can hope to master it. There are exceptions, of course. Dragons, as is well known, possess such a talent innately. With no need for study, they can, guided by some otherworldly intuition, change between humanoid and reptilian form. As for the other races, higher vampires, e.g. Bruche, are known to flicker between states, yet given the understandable difficulties of conducting research in this area, we do not know if this transition constitutes an act of polymorphy. The human race is, obviously, much more accessible to scholars of polymorphy. Their years of study have borne fruit in the form of a set of methods and guidelines for the identification, nurture, and deployment of this talent. The most accomplished result of the careful application of these methods? Philippa Eilhart. The Witcher 3, Trader's Notes. I'd always thought myself a simple trader, a man who buys here and sells there and makes a bit of a coin for himself in the doing. But yesterday I learned I constitute what's called a strategic risk, and so cannot cross the bridge the Redanians control. Who knows what I have in my wagon, the sergeant said. Maybe I'm smuggling weapons, maybe I'm carrying spies' reports. When I said they'd nothing to fear from my bundles of cloth and lace, and that the only letters I'm carrying are from my dear wife, the sergeant slapped me across the face with his glove and ordered me to, and I quote,
Sod off, or else I would soon be seeing more stars than many an astronomer. As you can see, eloquence and good manners do not seem to be subjects of much importance at the Redanian Officers' Academy, though one must admit, the soldier did display a certain amount of linguistic creativity. Well, life goes on. I've hired a few mercenaries and a guide to help me ford across the river near the bridge. Once across, I'll blow that sergeant a kiss and continue on my way. The Witcher 3. Religion and Life. And should we thus submit our life to religion, or should we interpret religion so that it serves our lives instead? There are as many schools as there are philosophers, as many stories as there are human beings, and let us not forget elven beings, nor dwarven, halfling, gnomish ones, or any other such sapient creature familiar with the quandaries of the soul. I, for my part, having survived now more than 120 years, vodka and radishes work wonders, lend no credence to anyone who claims differently, can swear with all certainty that there is no way to reconcile everyone at once, and what pleases one will provoke whinging and sulking in another, and will undoubtedly cause a third to reach for his knife if it dares depart from his known narrow world by so much as a hair. What then are we to do? How should we live? Why, as we like, as our soul urges, disregarding all the brayings of philosophers and ethicists, those contained in this tome included. Disregard them as we would fairy tales or old wives' legends. The Witcher 3. Varen's Journal. Elga's gear is fantastic. I knew it at once, soon as I found it. Right away I said every new Witcher we train should be given such equipment. That is, if we are serious about making monster slayers out of this band of prissy schoolboys. How many times must I, as our honourable resident mage, devote some of his precious time to actual work? Resident like that's as useful as a boil on the bottom. At least his assistant, Churd, knows a thing or two about metallurgy. The two of them have finally gotten down to work. The steel sword diagram is now ready, and assuming they didn't foul anything up, tomorrow I'll forge the first blade. I'll go to Churd's workshop in the old watchtower after today's training and see if he's finished the silver sword diagram as he promised. Then I'll go to Hieronymus's tower. He should have finished that armor diagram by now. Thought I heard a signal horn in the distance a second ago. Hooch must be getting to my head. No one's fool enough to attack a keep full of witchers. The Witcher 2. The Horrors of War. Rot Fiends. Given that they are necrophages, rot fiends feed on carrion and human corpses, but this does not mean they do not attack the living. They appear on battlefields, near cities afflicted by plague, or around villages touched by famine. See a rot fiend and you can be sure there are many more in the area. They appear of a sudden, and disappear even more quickly if threatened, so exterminating them is difficult. Trapping rot fiends makes little or no sense. Instead, they are best dealt with by cutting off their food supply, that is, burning all corpses in the area. Corpses must be incinerated rather than buried, for rot fiends are avid and skillful diggers. Without sustenance, the beast will leave in search of new feeding grounds. The Witcher 2. Neckers in the Mist. Imagine a drowner that burrows tunnels, climbs trees, is more vicious than usual, and when ambushing its prey, it does so with many of its kin. Now you have a good idea of what a necker is. These primitive creatures are the bane of the wilderness. The inhabitants of forest villages fear them, and animals give their nests a wide berth. Neckers are social creatures, gathering in something akin to tribes, for they can only repel the attacks of stronger assailants en masse. Witchers can use their full range of skills and techniques when fighting neckers. Signs, bombs, poisons, and oils that augment bleeding are all extremely effective against the beasts. Necker nests are best destroyed with grape-shot bombs. Ambassador Shillard Fitz-Osterlin's first letter to the Emperor. To His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emir var Emrys, private and confidential. Your Imperial Majesty, I hasten to report that the sorcerer Vanamar has indeed proven right for the role assigned to him. He keeps his apprentice Cynthia on a short leash and displays nothing approaching excessive ambition. I believe him to be of unquestionable loyalty, and his abilities are more than adequate to serve your Imperial Majesty's objectives. The summit will be the final test. We will see how he behaves there, and if he proves more capable of resisting temptation than his female colleagues did. Please convey my kindest regards to your consort. Your Imperial Majesty's ever-faithful servant, Shillard Fitz-Osterlin. The Witcher 2. Ambassador Shillard Fitz-Osterlin's second letter to the Emperor. To His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emir var Emrys, private and confidential. Your Imperial Majesty, after visiting Foltest, may he rest in peace, as planned, I am now the guest of Henselt, whom I aim to present your Imperial Majesty's offer. Kedwin is a quarrelsome nation with an unreliable king and a wild nobility. Sympathies and allegiances shift time and again. Manipulating them takes no real skill. I note that Renold ap Matson has also taken up station in the barbarous north. I would take this occasion to express my doubt that sending him was necessary. Your Imperial Majesty knows that I do not trust the man and suspect he is hiding something from me. Your Imperial Majesty's ever-faithful servant, Shillard Fitz-Osterlin. The Witcher 2. Ambassador Shillard Fitz-Osterlin's third letter to the Emperor. To His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Nilfgaard Emir var Emrys, private and confidential. Your Imperial Majesty, as Your Imperial Majesty foresaw, my negotiations with Henselt proved an uphill battle. He rejected Your Imperial Majesty's proposition. Furthermore, I believe the so-called Lodge will soon cease to serve our aims. For now, the headstrong sorceresses are mitigated by the actions of Witcher Geralt, but in my opinion, he knows too much already and will need to be eliminated soon. Upon the conclusion of the summit in Loch Muin, I will immediately inform Your Imperial Majesty of the summit's results and of the circumstances of the Witcher's death. Your Imperial Majesty's ever-faithful servant, Shillard Fitz-Osterlin.
The Witcher 3. A Mother's Letter. Dearest Lily, if you're reading this, that means both your father and I are dead. I've asked Egward to give you this letter only when it is certain neither of us will return. A great deal happened while you were away at the academy. One of your father's ships sank and we fell into debt. I did not write you then because I did not want to worry you, did not want you to return. Your education and future are what matters most to us. Our creditors began to call in our loans and refused to accept payment in installments. When we were forced to admit we could not return the entire sum, they swore to destroy us. Some thugs began following our every step, never letting us out of their sight. It was only a matter of time before the family's secret was discovered. They directed the witch hunters to us, and we were thrown in the dungeon. I heard the guards gossiping about how we had to have a show trial and a show execution. I gave one my wedding ring, and he agreed to allow Egward to visit us. Your father wishes to give him some final instructions, and I want to give him this letter, a last unexpected farewell. Be strong, my sweet, for in your veins flows the blood of men and wolves, and with that comes responsibility. I forbid you to avenge us. That will not bring us life, and will only bring you the executioner's axe. You cannot die, not in that way. You must prove with your life and conduct that men and lycanthropes can live together in harmony. Leave town as soon as possible. Take only what is necessary. Say farewell to no one. Do not show yourself in public. Journey to where we used to hunt when you were a young girl, and brace for the worst. The people there surely do not remember us, but they are good, simple villagers. They will treat you with kindness. Let us hope the madness of this persecution will soon end, and you'll be able to return home. In the meantime, take care of yourself, and do not let them provoke you. Remember who you are, and do not let anyone convince you that is something evil. This is how you were born, and you should be proud of it. Live for us. We love you. Mother.
The Witcher 3. Heroes of Skellige. Tyr. Clan Tursiak, master of Ain Skellige, was founded by a hero named Tyr. Legend has it that to take possession of the land promised him by Heimdall, his father, Tyr first had to defeat a great and powerful bear named Ingvar. It was well known that no mortal had ever survived an encounter with Ingvar, so Tyr decided to prepare properly for the fight. He ventured into the deepest cave in Skellige, and with the fire of the bowels of the earth as his furnace, he forged a blade so fine it could slice a hair lengthwise, and so strong it could fell 100-year-old tree in one blow and not be dulled. Hulin, his mother, engraved protective runes upon the sword by the first light of dawn, so that it would protect Tyr from the beast's attacks. Ingvar was defeated. Tyr became master of Ain Skellige, and his descendants are one of the wealthiest and most powerful clans in the Isles to this day. The Witcher 2. 3 years among the Endregas. Endregas are forest creatures that resemble arachnids. They are especially fond of floodplains, as moisture and tall grass suit them. Longer than they are tall, they move about on all fours and are extremely difficult to spot as they lie motionless, awaiting their prey. Like Kikimors, Endregas are divided into castes, with warriors being most numerous, guards being less common, and queens being a real rarity. These monsters, like arachnids, hatch from eggs. Impregnated queens lay the eggs in cocoons, which hang from trees in areas known as nests.
The lesser creatures zealously guard their queens, as colonies depend on them for survival. The queens themselves remain hidden, caring little for what happens to other adult specimens. However, when their nest is threatened, they emerge swiftly and fight ferociously. Thus, to exterminate an Endrega colony, one must set fire to its cocoons to draw out and kill the queen. The Witcher 3, Julia Canaan's Diary. We sold the artifacts we acquired in our last expedition at the Hraki Bazaar in Sedaris, made only a modest profit, but a profit all the same. Dicker has come across information about a purported elven treasure hoard said to be hidden in the sewers beneath Temple Isle. To my thinking, these rumors might very well be true. After all, human cities, Novigrad included, were built on elven foundations, so why should we not search for elven treasure beneath its streets? If but a tenth of what the tales say is true, this hoard contains enough riches to last us to the end of our days. Today is the 1st of Fane. We are setting out. Our party consists of Rian, Dicker, Maxi, Miko, and me. The entrance to the underground passages was protected by an illusion. Luckily, Miko was able to dispel it. There truly must be something of value down here. We shall descend deeper. This does not look like a treasury. It is rather some sort of hospital or a laboratory. After this point, the entries are chaotic, with many blots and incomplete words. A massacre! Only I could do nothing. The others dead. All. The elves, that was their laboratory, and what we saw, he... I cannot sleep for the umpteenth night in a row. I see them all whenever I close my eyes. Rian, Dicker, Maxi, Miko. The insomnia is killing me. And that symbol, that cat, it stares at me. Here, kitty kitty. Meow. Letter to Pellar. I asked, I threatened, and yet you did nothing. Now I can only beg. Hold Forefather's Eve. This situation is treacherous, I know. The witch hunters prey on human poverty and pay informants well, but it is not fitting to condemn our dead to eternal wandering. If needs be, I will take it all on myself. Claim responsibility. I'd rather die than carry on my conscience dead souls who will never know comfort. Bolko, Yaldaman of Midcopse. The Witcher 2, The Visionary's Notes, 1. My Path to the Light, First Fragment. I must be repentant, after years spent living in error. No soldierly vice was too vile for me. During my years of service, I embraced gambling, alcohol, sloth, lies, and evil profanity. I took lives, and not just when ordered. I was cruel. Today, I see that I had sunk into a darkness from the depths of which I could not see the light. Miss Sabrina Glevissig, bright and pure as a goddess, shone like the light of a candle in the blackest night. She always supported the soldiers, and tried to draw me on to the path of righteousness. Yet, I was blind to the light. The Witcher 2, The Visionary's Notes, 2. My Road to the Light, the second fragment. We nailed Miss Glevissig to a wheel. We pierced her slender hands and throttled her narrow waist with a rope. The pyre was readied beforehand. Henselt laughed and encouraged us to mock her, so we did. As the flames licked the wood, I looked into her bright eyes, yet I could see no fear in them, only peace. I trembled for the first time. I trembled once again as the flames themselves starved. The fire would not accept the victim. Then Henselt ordered to feed the flames with more wood. The branches were wet, and the smoke stung our eyes, filling us with remorse. Through the flames I could see Miss Glevissig suffocating, and I trembled for the third time. I grabbed a spear used to push the wood on the pyre. Unmindful of the heat, I scaled the flaming wood and pierced her heart. Thus was I transformed in the fire. The Witcher 2, The Visionary's Notes, 3. My Road to the Light, the third fragment. Henselt was furious that I had ruined his spectacle. I was beaten to a pulp. Soon I was stripped of my rank, and those I had thought friends turned from me. I started drinking more than ever and sank into sloth, so I was regularly punished. I spent all my free time in solitude. Until one day, as I sat with a bottle of foul spirits, staring at a sizzling candle stub, I understood that it had all happened for a reason. I had a calling. The flicker that Miss Glevissig had lit within me spread over my heart, and it burned with the flame of faith. The Witcher 3, Lumberjack's Letter to His Wife.
Don't know how long I'll stay here. Till now the work was tough, sure, but we earned a decent living. Lately, though, I fear for my life. Something haunts the place at night. It roars and wails. We can't stand it no more. And the wolves, they're always howling. Yesterday, Shaman went to the privy during the night and never returned. Didn't find no body nor tracks. Who knows, maybe he ran off. I'd rather that than something worse to have happened. Truth be told, I think about leaving more and more lately, about going back to you and the young one. I'm no fool. Maybe I could learn another trade, and we get by, somehow.
The Witcher 3, Lugos's letter. Arnor, Ingvar, son of Ulmar, he cheated us. I'm dead certain. Tricked us all, the whoreson, me and you lot both. All this hating on me you've been doing is pointless. I swore 100 times we'd split the booty from this raid as we've split the others, evenly, and I meant it. Thing is, 2 chests of jewels, a silver dagger, and some gold cups and plates have gone missing. I summoned all from the clan who were on the raid, and all swore on the blood of their fathers, and their fathers' fathers before them, that they'd not taken more than their share. That leaves Ingvar. I might have known better than to take it on Craterboard. It were my error, but one we can correct. One you can correct. Take a handful of men and go find him. Then take from him what's ours. You have me blessing. Lugos, the one they call Madman. The Witcher 2, Beings of the Element of Earth. The Earth Elemental is the younger brother of the legendary Dao, the genie capable of creating earthquakes and flattening mountains. Younger means less powerful, but also more mischievous, felling trees, toppling the walls of buildings, and crushing people into a pulp number among this creature's pranks. Of course, it performs only those its master wishes it to. The Witcher 2, The History of the Council of Mages. The Supreme Council of Sorcerers consisted of talented mages, most of whom also were advisors to rulers of northern kingdoms. Philippa Eilhart and Codwin of Lan Exeter were, among others, its members. Though only one member of the council turned out to be a Nilfgaardian supporter during the Thaned Rebellion, a large part of its members were neutral mages, and that caused a split in the body. Though most of the council's members survived these events, the loss of importance and the king's support resulted in disbanding the association, and sorcerers lost most of their previous influence in the north. The Witcher 3, Contract, Missing Miners. It'll not come as news to most, but let me repeat for the ignorant. A few of our lads went looking for ore in the mountains and never returned. They must have run into trouble. And since those brave warriors couldn't handle it themselves, it must have been serious trouble indeed. That's why I'm looking for a brave man to go up and suss out what's become of them. Whoever does so will get gold to match his glory. Gjár, Village Elder of Blandir. The Witcher 3, My Manifesto, The Life of Jacques d'Aldesberg. The reasons for choosing Jacques d'Aldesberg as Grand Master remain a mystery. The Order of the White Rose had gone through a crisis in those times and was on the verge of collapse, so one might guess that the Brethren wished to have someone decisive as their leader, someone with a clear vision. D'Aldesberg was precisely such a man. One of his first decisions was to change the Brotherhood's name to the Order of the Flaming Rose. The most puzzling aspect, however, is that the Order and the king himself decided to trust a man who, for all intents and purposes, had appeared out of nowhere. They say he was a wanderer, an itinerant priest who moved crowds with his speeches declaiming non-humans. They say he worked miracles and showed his flock visions of a world destroyed by the White Frost. He was undoubtedly a man of great charisma, which he in turn tried to instill in others. Was he truly a source? Was he indeed gifted with raw magic talent? That we will never know for certain. The Witcher 2, The Pontar Valley. If you have but a morsel of geographical knowledge, one glance at a map is enough to know why the Pontar Valley is strategically important. It is here that the borders of Temeria, Redania, Kedwin, and Edirn meet. It is the valley that physically marks these frontiers. They say that he who controls the Pontar Valley controls the north, so it is no wonder that the cited realms have clashed here more than once. Blood has often mingled with the waters of the Pontar, though the reasons for this have varied. Wars waged by nobles in pursuit of political interests and merchants seeking trade privileges have been intermingled with riots and massacres, elven uprisings, and the revolts of frontier barons. All these have been garnished with the occasional peasant rebellion, an event that forces often quarreling factions to unite and crush plebeian mobs drunk on blood and carnage. As the reader will soon learn, this time the region would again bear witness to events both important and bloody. The Witcher 2, The Wild Hunt. According to the Nordlings, the Wild Hunt is a procession, or rather a cavalcade, of skeletal horsemen. They rush across the sky on the bony remains of steeds. Clad in rusty remnants of armor, they wear jagged swords at their waists. Like comets, the Wild Hunt is an omen of war, which has been confirmed beyond all doubt. The spectral cavalcade ventures out in search of victims every several years, but its harvest was never as rich as just before the last war with Nilfgaard, when over 20 souls went missing in Novigrad alone after the hunt passed through. Curiously, Elven and Dwarven legends make not the slightest mention of the Wild Hunt. The Witcher 2, Veopatis, a Forgotten God. Veopatis, a forgotten god of the Pontar Valley, is still worshipped in certain forest settlements, but the times of his greatness and popularity are long past. A few priestesses and witches make offerings to him, yet no common folk wish to take part in their rites. In the era of human colonization, Veopatis was a guardian god, often associated with rivers from which humans drew benefit. He guarded people from the dangers of the forest. Poles bearing his likeness marked the border between areas that had been tamed and those that remained wild and dangerous. Veopatis gave people fish, made selling easier, and his name was used to ward off beasts. Yet he remained petulant and fierce. In these times, if those wandering through the woods come across stone idols with gaping jaws, they believe them to be the likenesses of fierce monsters rather than statues commemorating a once-loved deity. The Witcher 2, Beings of the Element of Fire. Fire elementals, like post-conjunction creatures, hail from another reality and are aliens in our world. Philosophers claim they experience no emotions and do not think the way trolls and other more familiar creatures think. Controlled completely by magic, a fire elemental obediently carries out its summoning mage's orders. If its master is a passionate smoker, the elemental will provide fire to light his or her pipe, and if its master is threatened, the elemental will incinerate any and all foes. The Witcher 3, Letter from A. Witcher. In the ocean of possibility, some events are more likely and some less. It is not easy to fish out the first, not even when one's intellect stretches through all time and space. I left this letter for you in the hope that, despite all odds, you will come across it one day, for I must warn you, mankind is threatened. The prophesied destruction by the White Frost is not just the babbling of some mad she-elf. Perhaps I will have the opportunity to convince you of this in person. If not, I must rely on this letter, which you will read many years from now, at a time when you know more than you did when we first met. Know that nothing will save the world, except preparing its entire population for this catastrophe. The old tales say a child of the elder blood can stave off the danger, but I tried and failed. Ever since, I have been haunted by a hideous vision, a crowned wraith, the spectre of my failure. I was the chosen one, and the chosen one failed. You and your brotherhood are our only hope. When the time of the wolf's blizzard comes, men shall perish, and only the Ubermen will survive. Your duty is to give the world Ubermen. Whatever you think of me, do not fail as I have failed. A.